how the potential arrest of Donald Trump could unfold. Security issues could affect any arrest and court appearance involving the former president. The Manhattan grand jury hearing evidence about Donald Trump's role in a payment to a porn star appears to be wrapping up its work, indicating that prosecutors could soon ask jurors to vote on an indictment of the former president. Mr. Trump, who has denied wrongdoing, has said the probe by the Office of Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, a Democrat, is politically motivated. A grand jury indictment would kick off a process in which Mr. Trump would likely travel to Manhattan to face charges. Here is how that could play out. An indictment and an arrest warrant would be filed under seal with the court before becoming public. Prosecutors would notify Mr. Trump's lawyers of the sealed indictment and negotiate a time and date for his surrender. The indictment would remain sealed until after Mr. Trump was formally arrested and booked. We won't see a copy of that indictment or know definitively what the charges are until he is arraigned by a judge, said Karen Agnifilo, a former prosecutor in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. A defendant who is allowed to surrender typically reports at an agreed-upon date and time to the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, which is attached to the Manhattan Criminal Courthouse. Detective investigators from the District Attorney's Office then arrest the defendant. This approach avoids the public spectacle of an arrest elsewhere, and the perp walk that often comes with it. If he were to surrender and be arrested, Mr. Trump would likely have his fingerprints scanned, his photograph taken for a mug shot and be interviewed by detective investigators who would make an arrest report. And he would be issued a rap sheet reflecting this arrest, like every other person who is arrested and fingerprinted in this country, said Ms. Agnifilo. After being processed, defendants are typically taken to a holding cell next to a courtroom to await arraignment. Mr. Trump would likely receive some special accommodations out of security concerns and skip any wait on his arraignment, Ms. Agnifilo said. Donald Mihalek, a retired senior Secret Service agent, said the Secret Service and its agents are obligated under federal law to protect the former president in all settings, so they would be with him throughout the booking process and arraignment. The Secret Service would also likely turn the courthouse into a protective zone and bring Mr. Trump through a secure access point, said Mr. Mihalek, who served on the security details of former Presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama. My experience tells me, working with the court, the U.S. Secret Service would want this to be a well-choreographed event, probably with as little fanfare as possible and probably done as quietly as possible, he said. That is what typically happens when a defendant surrenders. However, it is unclear if an exception would be made in Mr. Trump's case. Mr. Mihalek said that the Secret Service, court officials and the district attorney's office would likely discuss ahead of the surrender whether Mr. Trump could be handcuffed. Ms. Agnifilo and Mr. Mihalek said that they thought handcuffing would be unlikely. During a court appearance, a judge would ask Mr. Trump to enter a plea to the charges in the indictment. Mr. Trump, as most defendants, would almost certainly plead not guilty. Prosecutors and Mr. Trump's lawyers might also discuss scheduling matters and the process by which prosecutors would hand over evidence, known as discovery, to the defense. If charged with a low-level felony, Mr. Trump would likely be released on his own recognizance. Cases in New York take months, and often more than a year, to go to trial. While the case is pending, lawyers would likely file legal briefs and argue over what evidence jurors would be allowed to hear. Be back in his Florida residence that same day.